Welcome to AI in Action, how to personalize email with AI. Erica, if you want to jump us, we'll do quick introductions and then just get right into this. So I'm Paul Raitzer, founder and CEO of Marketing AI Institute. If you don't know about the Institute, it's a media event and online education company that I founded in 2016, I guess. So we publish a lot of content, run events, do events like this and webinars like this to help make AI approachable and actionable for marketers. And I'm joined today by Erica. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't you give everybody just a quick overview on yourself and Rasa.io?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Paul, for having me. I feel so fortunate to be able to share information with you, the Marketing AI Institute community folks. Like Paul said, I am the COO at Rasa, and I have been in the marketing tech space for my entire career. I started working in Tulane in undergraduate admission, where I did strategic recruitment and marketing. And that sort of started my love for marketing and all things marketing tech. And from there, I went on to run the team at an agency that did all of the various digital services that helped our clients be found online. So lots of SEO, online ads, front end and back end web dev. So pretty much everything online, we do the full suite of services. But the one thing that we didn't touch was email, because email is so hard to do in a really quality way and at scale. And so that's what really intrigued me about Rasa.io. And that's what brought me to Rasa, because we use AI to personalize the content within every email. And which helps you scale an actual quality email product. So that is my journey, and that's how I came to be today.
Thank you for being here. And if
Sure.
you want to jump to the next one, if you've been with us earlier this week, we started the week off. So this is AI in Action Week. This is the whole concept of this series, is to show you AI at work, because it helps understand it. The more you can actually see what it does. So we started the week with Jeff Coyle and Market Muse. We had Kevin Myers AI Advertising yesterday, did an awesome demo of their AI platform, using AI and all these different elements from creative to ad targeting to performance insights. Today, we're going to talk about smart newsletters. Tomorrow, Kathy and Mike from Marketing AI Institute are going to give you a kind of a hands-on look at some of the tech we use at the Institute, show you how we're using AI to drive efficiency and performance. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in at any time in the Q&A and the chat. I'll be monitoring that as Erica's going through. Kathy from our team is also here, and she'll be helping if anybody needs anything from a technical standpoint. We will be sending these out on demand. So if you registered for all of them, you'll get access to all of them probably on Friday. I think they're going out. So everybody will get access to the presentation and the deck. And then I have a quick intro to Marketing AI Conference, and then I'm going to turn it over to Erica. So we are back live in person in Cleveland, Ohio in August of 2022 after a 2-year live event hiatus like the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So we are very excited to be back together with our community. We're just getting the agenda and speakers kind of in a final form. So we're actually going to be making an announcement about probably the first 15 or 20 speakers in the next 2 weeks here. And then we'll be announcing the main stage talks kind of as we go throughout the spring and into the early summer. So we would love it if you can be there in Cleveland with us. I know I am ready to be back with people. And
me too.
Virtual is great, but Erica, like I would like to sit together and have a drink and just enjoy life and conversations in person. So that's my Maycon talk. And Erica, I'm going to let you take it away and kind of walk us through how to build smart newsletters, how to personalize email.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. And I'll do a plug for Maycon. It's a great event. Everyone should go. So just to give you all a very high-level overview of what we do at Rasa, we personalize the content in each and every email from a list of pre-approved sources that you and your team deem to be valuable, producing relevant, trustworthy, authoritative content to your space. And we take the articles produced from those sources and personalize an email for each and every one of your subscribers. So it's a great way to send people relevant content, have them interact with your brand in a consistent way, and also to save a ton of time on the newsletter process, which, let's face it, putting together a newsletter is not the most exciting task that anyone has ever done. So we help save time on that task, in addition to, really amplify your own brand through using relevant external content alongside your own. Today, we're going to talk about how Rasa works. We're going to go through a few case studies, a few actual clients using the product. And then, like Paul said, we're going to have some time at the end for questions. So hopefully we'll have lots of great interaction on this session today. So email newsletters 2.0, like I just said, putting together the email newsletter tends to not be the most exciting task that one does in their day-to-day. But what Rasa does is we amplify the engagement in that newsletter, and we do it at the same time that we save you and your team between 5 and 20 hours a month on newsletter tasking. And so how do we do that? Oftentimes folks are sending a one-size-fits-all email. You might have some nurture campaigns going. It might be such that someone comes in on a particular landing page, so you fire off a nurture email or a nurture sequence, and then in that way they get some personalized emails. But very few folks are sending personalized email newsletters to their subscribers based on what their subscribers' interests are. And so what we allow you to do is, instead of sending one email to 10,000 people, you're sending 10,000 different versions of an email based on people's prior reading preferences and behaviors. So in the same way, for better or worse, to compare it to a social media feed, your social media profiles, your social media networks know what you're interested in reading. You're going to get recommended content to you in your feed based on prior reading preferences and behaviors. We're going to do that within an email, and in that way amplify subscriber base engagement. So how do we do that? Well, we're taking in the content from the sources that you deem to be trustworthy, relevant, authoritative in the space. This is just a group of sources in the business realm, but it could be, whatever content is related to your own space. And we can pull in content in a variety of different ways. So oftentimes it's going to be blog and RSS feed. So you're probably going to want to plug in your own blog. You're going to want to plug in your own podcast, Twitter handle, Facebook page. But there might be an influencer in the space who's also producing really great relevant content, or they tweet it out regularly on their Twitter handle. So you can pull in the articles that they tweet out. You can pull in videos published to a YouTube channel. Your LinkedIn company page, you can hook up, and we can pull in the articles that are shared. We also have a really awesome Rasa Chrome web extension. So if you download that, if you're the kind of person where you're oftentimes first thing in the morning surfing the web to read up on the most relevant industry news, you can just click a little button and send an article right into Rasa. So we talk about the AI, we talk about the aspect of time savings, but something else that's very powerful about the engine is the curation piece of it and what we can do with content curation. So what this looks like on the back end, once you've plugged in your sources, is we're going to take in all of those articles that those sources produce. Oftentimes, you're also going to probably want to filter down a source. So you might say, well, Harvard Business Review is a great source, but not everything that HBR produces is going to be relevant to my audience that's interested in marketing related content. So I'm only going to pull in an article from HBR, or call it active rather, if it hits on marketing and the title or the metadata or the AI determined concepts. And so from there, you get this really rich body of content that is eligible for send to your subscribers. And so we, from this body of content, we'll say, okay, well, Paul gets these articles, Erica gets these articles, Kathy gets these articles, based on our prior reading preferences and behaviors. And then what's also cool is you can see this toggle on the left here. You might say, all right, well, this article came in from a trustworthy source. It met all my filter criteria, but you know what? It's just not perfectly on brand for my subscriber base. So you can easily toggle it off, and then the AI won't consider it for the next send. But that's a really cool aspect of all of this too, is that the send process then becomes automated. So we're going to take, what the human editor said is deemed relevant, trustworthy, relevant, And then from there, the AI is just going to take it and the automation is going to push out the content to your subscriber base. And then this is just, we're gonna see this in the dashboard as well, but this is just a list of the group of sources that was pulled in for this particular example newsletter. So you can see the HubSpot blog, SEMrush, all of these rich marketing related sources are plugged into Rasa. So every time HubSpot produces or SEMrush produces, we're going to pull in that content, and then it's going to go into this active space in Rasa if it hits on your filter criteria as well, which you might or might not have. So to recap that process, everything's coming in from your content sources into Rasa. You have this human touch, and that's something that I think we're gonna touch on later, is that the magic really happens when it's kind of this blend of the AI plus the human touch. I mean, there's still things right now that a human does best, which is like the creative aspect, you know, knowing one's audience the best, better than an AI engine can or an algorithm can. So it's really like the magic happens when AI meets this human element of curation.
Eric, one thing I'll throw in, and I know we're going to look at the Institute pilot we have with the Smart Newsletter in a little bit, but one of the things that we had asked early on when we were looking at testing Rasa was the ability to add an editorial up front. So many of the newsletters that people get today will like lead with that 150 word editorial, which again gives kind of the personalization, human touch to it. That's capable of being integrated in as well, right? Like when we're doing this, it's not just automated curation. You can make it more human if you'd like to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Paul. So yes, we can infuse your message, your editorial to your readers, because that's another aspect of what humans do best, right? Is writing a note and a message, a meaningful piece to your readers. So that's something you can infuse in. We actually, Market Muse uses Rasa to do their weekly newsletter. And they do a big piece at the top of every email that talks about their upcoming webinars, everything that they want to promote. And then under that is where they have all of the curated content, the most relevant pieces for each of their readers. So yeah, it is an important aspect of many of our clients' newsletters, is that editorial in the beginning. Thank you. And then that also reminds me of another aspect of the human touch that can be used here, which is saying, oh, wow, this is a really great article. I want everyone to see this article. So you can sort of override the AI if you want, if you identify a piece that you want everyone to see. And you can also designate a source such that anytime that source produces, everyone sees its content. So you'd probably want to do that with your own internal sources, for example. And then this is just, you know, what it looks like on the front end, which is a newsletter. And we do have the option to completely customize your template. You have that and depending on which plan you go through, you can either upload your own HTML, or we can kind of take on the templating process for you. This is the American Marketing Association newsletter. They have their newsletter run such that whenever their AMA blog produces, that piece gets a specialized visual treatment at the top of every newsletter. So you can see every subscriber is getting leveraging voice in the B2B buyer journey at the top of their newsletter, but then the rest of the content is filling out with what's relevant to Dan, what's relevant to Lisa, based on what realm or what subcategory of marketing they're most interested in. And so you can see internal sources fall alongside the external content. And these are just more visuals, just to show the diversity of the templating available as well.
It automatically pulls in the text and the image and formats that, right? Like you're not going in and actually having to format all this and grab snippets and all that. It's yanking that from metadata from the source.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Paul. So you're templating one time. You're saying, okay, I want this to be the template that consistently goes out to my audience. But then we're pulling in the title, the meta description, the image. We're pulling all of that in automatically, and you can tweak it if you want, but oftentimes the publisher is gonna, spend time with that metadata. So there's not a lot of tweaking that needs to go into it. We're also gonna pull in the primary image along with the piece that's published. And then we use AI to hone in on the focal point of that image so that we can place it nicely within the visual, the templating that's laid out. You can see that in the center template in particular, the image sizes are different for the various articles. So that's where we use AI to say, okay, this is how to place the most major part of the image in each of the places that we have images laid out. And something else that's pretty cool, and for you folks who might be at agencies managing multiple newsletters for your various clients, we do make it very easy to have multiple newsletter instances under your one account. So you can create your own newsletter for your own agency, and then you can create additional newsletters for your clients, or additional newsletters that might be under a different campaign. And then you can say, all right, well, this is where I can toggle between the various newsletters, where you can compartmentalize the content, the subscribers, and the design for every newsletter. And then you might say, but client A might want to log into their own newsletter. So you can give them permissions to see just their newsletter, whereas you can manage the various multiple newsletters for your clients. And the way a lot of our agency clients use Rasa is that they're going to pay by the subscriber. We're going to, roll up all of their subscribers across their various newsletters, and then they might charge, a service fee on top of what they're paying to Rasa. And so in that way, their clients find Rasa as a very valuable service, because they don't have to put together their newsletter anymore. And then the agency does their newsletter with a very, very low time cost. So what are the benefits of all this? Well, for one, brand elevation. You're sending out more personalized content that's going to get greater engagement. We find that when we start to collect data on folks, those folks are going to engage at much higher rates. And then we lead with the AI, of course, and the personalization, the recommendations, the algorithm. It's all very powerful, but what's inherent in the AI too is all of the automated aspects of what's happening behind the scenes. So like Paul said earlier, we're pulling in all of the information from the publisher on each article, so you're not having to rewrite descriptions, resize images. That's all happening automatically. And then the send process can happen automatically. You're designating a schedule, and the newsletter will go out at that schedule. You can also do something going back to the aspect of human touch. You can back out a review window for yourself. So you can say, all right, well, 24 hours prior to send, I want to make sure that no new content comes into this content pool. So I can take comfort in knowing that I've reviewed all of the articles that might qualify for my readers. And I have time to write my editorial at the top, or boost up an article that I want everyone to see. So you do have this editorial window that you can build in for yourself if you want to do that. But otherwise, the newsletter is going to go out at the cadence of your choosing automatically, and it again is a huge time saver. And I love this slide. Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about this slide and how it relates?
Yeah, if anybody's attended our Intro to AI for Marketers live class that we do every couple of weeks, you're familiar with this, or if you've heard me give a talk where I've shown this. But this is the market machine scale that we devised as a framework to understand how intelligently automated AI makes your job, or a specific use case of your job. So as we're talking about email newsletters today, you can start to stack up all these individual tasks that go into developing a newsletter, from the curation of the content to the writing of the editorial, figuring out the subject line, send time optimization. When are we going to send this thing? Human in the loop of editing the curated content to figure out which pieces. So what you're doing is, like, we're not saying you get Rasa or you get a similar technology and all of a sudden, like, the newsletter is just checked off your list. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm just going to, build a list and it'll do its thing. No, there's a human in the loop element to this. Now, it is moving you along, and maybe it's like at a level 2, in some cases, or maybe it starts at level 1. Like in the early days, you really want to check all the sources, you really want to check the subject line. Like you're much more wanting to be in the loop to make sure you trust the machine to do what it's doing. And then it could move to that level 2 or level 3. And as Erica started at the beginning, like, you think about efficiency. So if you are in charge of a newsletter, or you're thinking about starting a newsletter, say, okay, what are all the tasks that would go into doing a newsletter well? And how much time is each of those tasks going to take me? And you may figure out that it's like, okay, well, send a good newsletter every week. It's probably about 3 to 5 hours. Maybe it's more, depending on how much curation you're doing. Multiply that by 4. It's like, okay, like that's 20 hours a month I'm spending on a newsletter. And I'm not even really looking at the data, and I'm certainly not personalizing it in the future. Like, I'm just picking things I think are interesting. Maybe my readers don't think they're that interesting. So you don't even have personalization going into it. There is no customization of the links you're sending to individuals instead of a whole group. So it's not even a fully optimized newsletter. And so that's the thing to think about. You kind of visualize this framework and say, okay, like there's 15 steps to send a newsletter, to do a newsletter well. I'm doing 10 of them. I'm not even doing the other 5 that would make it even better. And I'm spending 20 hours a month. How much time would I spend if I had this tech? And what value would it create to be able to do the personalization and the send time optimization? So, I think it's just, again, to help people realize AI isn't, 0 to 4. It's not, we're not going from nothing, like all human all the time, to fully autonomous. Fully autonomous isn't really a thing in marketing. It's not really possible with any tech. But level 1 can have a massive difference in your business. Like, it can save lots of time and money. You can get to level 2 or level 3. You may have transformational depending on what the use case is you're looking at. So yeah, it just kind of it's a good reminder for people of just trying to find ways to drive efficiency. And it might just be on a task or 2, but that could save you a ton of time.
Right. And even if you get to level 1 or level 2, you're still freeing up hours upon hours for humans to do what they still do best, which is all of the creative stuff, like the actual content creation, which obviously there are AIs now for content creation too, but you have, all these hours freed up to do what humans can do still better than machines. So I think we talked about most aspects of this and how the AI is, saving you time. And in the background at RASA, obviously we're recommending the articles within each email. We're using natural language processing to conceptualize each of the articles that come into the platform. So to understand at a high level what each one's about, and that's how we determine which articles meet the various filter criteria that you set up. And then we also use those concepts to roll up really valuable, rich reports to show you what your readership is mostly interested in over the time frame of your choosing. And we're going to have a couple slides on that later down the line. The article order, so putting the most valuable article for any given reader toward the top. We also will personalize subject lines based on the most popular title or the most popular article for each reader. That's our default setting. You can of course override that to write your own subject line that everyone gets, but a lot of folks decide to go with the AI chosen subject line. And then you can, there's some people who might manage a job bank, like if you're an association or if you are an organization where people look to you to spread good information in your field, you might have other kinds of types of feeds that we could use AI to make recommendations off of, like jobs listings. And then we talked about the images and how we use AI for the visual aspect of the emails as well. So data and insights. This is what I was talking a little bit about with regard to natural language processing and reading the articles that come into the system. Actually really quick, let me skip ahead. There we go. So this is a close-up look at that post page where we're conceptualizing each of the articles that come in, and you can see these concept tags underneath every article that come in. And so we're saying, okay, well, this article is about this article is about this article is about SEO. And so as people click on those articles and engage with them in the emails, we're going to roll up all of those concepts so that we can tell you at a high level what your readers are interested in. So in this particular case for this AMA report, their readers are over the past 30 days are more interested in B2B than B2C. So just interesting insights that you can get. You can obviously make that time frame shorter, look at the window over, a much longer period of time. So it's totally up to you.
So those automated tags are using natural language processing, a form of AI, to figure out what the tags are. Those aren't human applied tags. You don't have someone on your team sitting there and tagging social media marketing, things like that.
That's right. Yeah, no, this is all happening AI behind the scenes to conceptualize and then and draw up these reports.
And for everybody, your blog posts, in the future, humans won't be tagging content. In a lot of cases, certainly bigger media companies, humans aren't tagging content. Humans are confirming the machine's doing a good job properly tagging content.
Right.
But having a 5,000 word taxonomy and having editors that have to go through and tag all your content, that is not a human task in the future. The tech is already probably at human levels when it comes to tagging content.
That is such a good point. Yeah, that is something that people come to us all the time and say, but what if we want to use our own taxonomy? And we steer them in this direction, because I think this is definitely the way of the future as far as content taxonomy goes. But you can on a one-off level add your own tags if you want alongside the AI tags. For example, if your editor wants to determine which article gets the top space in each newsletter, you could put on, Erica's pick or Erica is a tag for each of those self-selected articles, and then see in the concept reports how much engagement at a higher level that your own editor picked articles get.
So this is in a way, this is kind of a look into how the algorithm is selecting articles, at a macro level. When you look at the popularity of clicks by category or by tag, you're starting to at least see some transparency into the algorithm itself. It's learning from this. Then obviously it's having a personalized element to that. Say, okay, Erica clicks on this or this, but this tells you popularity within the algorithm largely.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that is. Thank you for making that point. So now I'm actually going to go back to our integration slide. So we have many integrations. Many of these that you're looking at right now are subscriber integrations. So a lot of people will ask us, well, I already use MailChimp, or I use Constant Contact, or I use ActiveCampaign. So at Rasa, we use ActiveCampaign too, and we will tag people based on the various landing pages that they came into the site on to understand which sort of nurture campaigns to fire off or what kind of content funnel to put people in. But then we have that run alongside our Rasa newsletter, which also goes out weekly. And so we sync our subscribers using these plug and play integrations. So Constant Contact, ActiveCampaign, Magnet Mail, MailChimp. A lot of folks will use Rasa alongside one of those other engines. And then some of these are content integrations, like this LinkedIn content integration is to pull in from your LinkedIn company page the various articles that you share. And then we have a lot of the connector integrations like Zapier, for example. Okay, so now we're going back forward this. All right, and then elevated promotion. So this might not be relevant to every single listener today, but we do have real estate in the emails for outside advertisers. If you do have outside advertisers paying for space or real estate in your newsletter, or just for your own internal promotions, what people find is that because their Rasa newsletters get such great engagement and better engagement than the average email campaign, that it's a great place to infuse ads and various internal promotions, like for their own conferences or webinars, etc. All right, with that, I'm actually just gonna kind of dive into our one of our instances of Rasa, which is the Marketing AI Institute instance. This is a pilot that the Institute is working on right now. So I thought it would be a really relevant one to kind of dive into for this audience. And I know that you folks have already seen some of the shots in my slides, but I thought it would be a good real life example to go through. So this is our sources page. So the Marketing AI Institute team have entered in sources that will produce content relevant to marketing and AI. And you can see all of the number on the aggregate, the number of articles that each of these sources have produced. So Tech Republic.
And that's since the last send, right? That's like
the last send.
Okay.
Exactly. And so that's actually a really good point. We have a bias toward recency in the platform, but we also have this section over here called Evergreen. So what you can do is, as really interesting articles come up week to week, you might say, well, this article is going to be relevant like way into the future too. So if I have a new subscriber come into my list, I want this article to qualify into the future. And so you can kind of bank your content and bank your various cornerstone pieces.
And just to follow up, so what we're doing, we've been testing this for a little while. We're using it internally. Like, you can't go to our site and subscribe to this right now if you're like, oh, I want to get this. If you do, let me know. Like, might move us to do this sooner. But what we're doing is we get this, I think, 2 or 3 times a week. And so internally, we actually use this for curation of highly relevant stuff to us. And so our content team gets this, and it actually helps inform our content strategy and what we're sharing on social. So it is being used, but it's an internal use case right now, but we are exploring the idea of making it a public tool, or a version of this as a public tool.
Awesome. Yeah, so you can see that we're pulling in from Paul's Twitter handle, for example, and then, of course, the Marketing AI Institute blog. And in this case, we've boosted the Marketing AI Institute blog, which is what you probably want to do with your own internal sources, because whenever your blog produces, you want everyone to see that content. So, good editorial controls at your disposal. And then to look at the granular view of that, so here are all the articles that have pulled in. And what's also cool is you can, going back to talking about tagging and filters, you can hover over a given article to see which match or include matches it's hit on. So this one is relevant to sales and advertising, keywords related to relevant, interesting content in the space. And then something that we haven't really touched on is that we also have the ability for you to do exclude filters. So if there's a list of, let's say, 3 to 5 competitors that you don't necessarily want to mention in your own newsletter, you can exclude match on those competitor names, or just topics in general that you want to steer clear of. And then if you found an article in this pool that you wanted everyone to see, you could do what we call super boosting it, which would allow it to go to the very top of everyone's newsletter. And then there's some other, tips and tricks that we have that we can help you out with in terms of curating and the various editorial controls that you have at your disposal.
And the allow toggle, that just says, oh yeah, don't put this one in anybody's, right? If I just toggle that off, it's like, yeah, don't use this one.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes. You could easily say, this one not relevant to my audience. I want to turn it off, and then it won't qualify for anyone. So you do have these controls.
Yeah. And so that, like, for us, and again, if we were to scale the use of this, like, the way I think about this is some of the most intriguing content about AI is not coming from marketing sources. Actually, the vast majority of interesting AI content isn't coming from people in marketing and sales. It's coming from a Venture Beat or Wired Magazine or TED Talk, whatever it is. Like, it's coming from all these other sources where really smart AI researchers and entrepreneurs are talking about AI and advancements with, like, DeepMind, for example, done by Google. Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, there's going to be all kinds of things that are going to come from Wired that aren't going to be relevant to our audience, but they might be relevant to people want to understand bigger picture AI. And so we may spend more time with the human in the loop, with the curated sourcing, going to say, yeah, not relevant. But what we found is it's still really good. Like, I mean, we don't do that for our internal one. We don't go through and, like, filter out the allow. And I would say, like, if I get 10 articles in a newsletter, 8 of them are like, yeah, I want to read that. I don't have time to, but, like, I would read that. So it has gotten good at sending me stuff that I find very relevant, even with
learned all about your preferences.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, but
actually, no, I'm glad you said that, because in order to not be totally scary, we do actually reserve a bit of real estate in every newsletter for not personalized recommendations. So still articles from your content pool and from sources you've said are okay, but maybe in such a way that you're exposed to stuff that might not be exactly based on your own reading preferences, so that people don't end up in an echo chamber of, you know, their own thoughts and preferences, which is always a danger, you know, when it comes to AI. So, and then with that, so here's the visual, and this is going to pull in automatically. We're going to get the picture from the article, we're going to get the title, we're going to get the source, and all of these inputs can be tweaked, right? Like you can do a lot of customizations just with our more basic templates. And then, like I said, you can totally customize the HTML as well. So now I'll go back into my slides. We just have a few clients that we want to talk about to touch on some case studies. I'll go ahead and back into my slideshow.
As she's pulling this up, remember, we will Q&A. Go if you've got questions, go ahead and start firing them into the Q&A or put them in the chat. I'll be watching that. We've got some in already. So yeah, as she's going through these case studies, start thinking about the questions. We'll have plenty of time for questions here.
Great, thank you. So we talked a little bit about the agency use case here. This is Agency Pure, one of our early clients. Tarek and his team first embarked on their RASA path for their own newsletter. So, you know, wanting to kind of give their newsletter new life. They felt like their existing newsletter didn't get a ton of engagement. They talked about how, you know, like passing the newsletter task from person to person at the agency was just like such a drag because nobody wanted to put together the newsletter. So they were like, okay, well, let's try this AI thing, because if we're talking about the potential for increased engagement and time savings, because this is a task that, you know, not a ton of people on our team are jumping to execute, let's see if this can solve those problems. So it did. They saw great engagement from, you know, their RASA newsletter. They put in a ton of marketing related sources, similar to the source group in the American Marketing Association newsletter, and they saw great engagement. And then from there, they started to use it for their clients. So and adding that in their suite of offerings for their clients, some of their standard packages. So that you know, they could provide that value in terms of, you know, both the setup of their RASA newsletter, which in most cases didn't take a ton of time, depending on, you know, the content realm that they were working within. But their clients just found a ton of value in not having to do that task anymore, but also, you know, seeing their own content automatically disseminated alongside other external blogs and articles that are relevant to their audience. And then this is a fun use case too. So Matt Moscona hosts an ESPN radio show, and the way that he connected with his audience is through, you know, video and through his own radio show, but he didn't have any email campaign. So he was kind of starting from scratch in the world of email. Another way that he did connect with his audience, though, was through his Twitter handle. So he was already spending the time to curate the articles that he tweeted out to his subscribers. And that he, you know, spent a ton of time in the morning reading the latest sports news and figuring out what the most relevant pieces would be to share with his community of users. And so his use case for RASA was, well, if I'm already spending the time identifying these relevant news pieces and articles, I can just plug my Twitter handle into RASA and not even log into the RASA platform barely, and have the newsletter go out at a regular cadence. So he was sending out his newsletter at the beginning weekly, and then he started to move to every other day, and during like hot sports seasons, a daily cadence. And again, he was not even having to log into the RASA platform, because we were just drawing from his Twitter handle, drawing in the articles that he tweeted out to personalize the news for each of his readers. And it was just another way for him to reach people, because if you think about, you're tweeting out an article, the chances of, you know, any given person in your audience seeing the article that you're tweeting out at any given time is very low, but the chances of it reaching them in their inbox is much higher, because it's, for better or worse, email is still, you know, the dinosaur that it is. Email is still, you know, a big player in the space and still gets really great engagement. So it was a great way for him to reach his audience on another level. And then we talked a little bit already about the American Marketing Association. They were sending out a weekly newsletter of all their own content. And they just kind of came to the realization that, not everyone, marketers aren't one size fits all. Marketers are graphic designers, they're video folks, they're SEO folks, they're digital ads people, they're branding people, they're, creative or very data focused. So they were thinking, why would we send out a one size fits all newsletter when marketers are not one size fits all by any means? So that was their impetus to get their RASA newsletter going, and at the same time increase the frequency with which they reached each of their subscribers. So they were able to increase frequency and send out much more relevant content to people, but at the same time still keep their AMA produced piece at the top for everyone, because they still did want that great site traffic that they got from their own internal content, and they still did want all of their members to see what they were producing internally. And this is just a quote from the folks at AMA attesting to the fact that they have a much more relevant way to stay in touch with their subscribers. And then this is the American Society of Association Executives. We work with a good number of professional and trade associations at RASA, and they did a really cool test at the very beginning. They started using our tech about 3 years ago, and they A/B tested their entire audience, and they split their audience into 2 groups, and they had their regular newsletter run, and then they peeled off 50% of their audience and made their newsletter look visually the exact same in RASA, except we were personalizing the articles and the content alongside relevant external content that was personalized. And we saw just a tremendous increase in engagement in the AI version of their newsletter. And so now they obviously are sending to their full audience through RASA, but that was a really cool test for us. And you can read more about that on our site, that case study.
That's a smart play. I mean, again, if you're a corporate comms person or you're an agency, maybe you have like a legit audience and you got 10,000, 100,000, whatever subscribers, and the idea of just blowing up what you're doing, and maybe get decent open rates, decent clicks, and it's like, well, maybe this is better. But that's a smart way to do it. Take your low fatigue audience, split it in half, like test it, or give people the option to sign up for a test. Say, hey, we're exploring, a new, smarter newsletter. If you'd like to be a part of our pilot group, check it out. Now, so just like, you don't have to completely change the way you're doing it. You can go in and just prove the data. If you're in an organization that needs data to make a leap like that, there's ways to do it. And that's a smart way that they did it. That's cool.
Yeah, it was a really fun project for us, and cool results. And that's the other thing. Yeah, I mean, use it as, a method for trying to re-engage. Something else that a lot of our clients do upon launch is they'll say in the newsletter, this is an AI-powered newsletter. Yeah. As you engage with the articles, the newsletter will personalize, and people appreciate that. And so it actually inspires more engagement that way too. And this is just client quotes along those lines. I also recommend that folks go to our page in G2. G2 is a great directory of SaaS platforms and comparing and contrasting different tools across different mediums. So we have some good customer testimonials there if you're starting to explore different solutions and you're in the beginning of your buying cycle. And with that, I'll open it up to questions, and I'll go ahead and stop my share.
That was great. And I hope again, it delivered for people, because the whole idea of this series is to show it. And I think this is a great example. I mean, we all either send email newsletters or, consider the idea of email newsletters being a part of it. And the whole premise of what we try and teach people is just do it smarter. Like, if there's smarter tech to make you better at doing the thing, just go get the smarter tech. So we do have questions though. So let's make sure we get to these. All right. So when you're personalizing each email, how are you managing the control groups? Can you please talk more about experimentation capabilities that your platform provides? Okay, so are there any groups going on? You're testing an A group versus a B group, or is it just sending to all 10,000 people and then it's just learning from there? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we don't have, so that test that I talked about with ASAE, where they kind of peeled off half their audience for RASA in the beginning of their work with us, we don't have an automated way do that, unfortunately.
Okay.
But you can test your current platform against Rasa and then decide which one is better. But also in terms of a way to segment, a lot of our clients do segment with multiple newsletters. So they might say, if the content that appeals to two different groups, say, is just completely and totally different and totally compartmentalized, then a good way to work on that is just to do two separate newsletters for those two groups.
All right. Can you personalize ads, product recommendation, real estate? So it's asking personalization of the ad component, the CTA component.
That's a great question. So we have full ad server integration capabilities. We are not an ad server, but we do work with, we have a few clients that personalize their ad content, but they do that through a server and they integrate that with Rasa. So if that listener wants to reach out to me at erica@rasa.io, I can give them some recommendations of companies that do that well.
And then a follow-up from Natalie here. How do you avoid a cold start problem with new subscribers or newer subscribers? How do you know what type of content newer subscribers prefer?
That is a great question. I think that disclaiming that it is an AI-powered newsletter that gets smarter as people engage is a great way to start with that. And then in terms of, you know, how fast we can personalize, we can start to personalize as soon as someone opens and clicks. So you don't really have to worry about a huge lag. And then, you know, for some of our enterprise clients, we do kind of hydrate the database going in with people's interests, but we don't really have to do that. And with most folks, we don't.
And just for background again, like recommendation engines are a core application of AI. So you see recommendation engines in Spotify and Netflix and, you know, Apple and Apple Music, basically any Disney Plus, like any media app you have or content company, they're building this personalization through recommendation engines where the machine, the AI, is predicting what you will find of interest. So when you cold start with Netflix, it shows you like most popular stuff. It tries to give you like high level categories so that it can start learning which things you're actually going to click on. Social media feeds work the same way. They're going to show you like general stuff, and then it quickly starts learning and personalizing based on. So it's a similar concept to how you know Rasa's tackling content here. Okay, and you asked I was going to ask that follow on of like how long it takes for it to learn preferences, but you're saying it's immediate.
It's right away.
Yeah. Okay. Is multivariate test methodology part of your AI agent, or how does it get factored in?
Multivariate test methodology. Paul,
like A/B test. I think A/B testing.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. So to an extent, so like Paul kind of talked about in the beginning, we might use the most popular articles across an audience to test. We might use a little bit of randomization, but we're going to kind of throw things out there to try to get someone to open and click and keep testing until we get that activity that will allow us to further personalize. And
then subject lines, you had alluded to it chooses, because I would say like this was one of the ones when we started piloting Rasa that I wouldn't say concerned about, but I would definitely like, well, how does that work? Because like, what if it picks a subject line that I don't, like maybe it picks an article that I wouldn't have chosen, but I didn't filter it out. And then it actually makes that article the subject line. And now we just send a subject line to people that we would never have humanly chosen the subject line. So one, I know you can choose this, so like edit the subject line, but talk to me about how that subject line is chosen and the human in the loop side to know ahead of time or be able to tell the system not to use specific subject lines.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can start out by having a one size fits all subject line and seeing what sort of engagement that gets, and then evolve to using the AI chosen once you've collected some data on folks. So instead of starting right away with the AI where, in the very beginning, inherently there's going to be an element of randomization, then you can, this way you can kind of collect data before that happens, before you evolve to using AI personalized.
And then going back to the beginning of the curation. So I know when we start, it gives you the ability for us to say, hey, here's the 25 sources we think are really, intelligent or really valuable. Does the system recommend related sources, or does it get into actually like finding additional sources, or does it only rely on the human to say these are the sources we want to curate from?
It's going to mostly rely on the human. What we also have built up over the years, just because we've been doing this for so long in so many different verticals, we have a content library that gives people a little jump start. It is by no means a representation of all things that can be put in, because the number of content sources you can enter into RAS is infinite. But we have collected a lot of popular sources across some of our most popular spaces that people send out content in.
I think we got through all the questions. So Erica,
Awesome.
this is awesome. Thank you again for doing it. Everybody, thank you for
you.
joining us today.
Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, it's and if you have more questions, like reach out to Erica. Kathy put her email address in there, so you can do that and check them out. And then we have tomorrow, Kathy McPhillips, our Chief Growth Officer, and Mike Kaput, our Chief Content Officer at the Institute, are going to be demoing some AI tech that we use at the Institute and answering any questions you may have there. So join us tomorrow for that, and then watch for the on-demand links probably at the end of the week for access to all the sessions from this week. So Erica,
Awesome.
Again, thank you. That was fun.
Thank
do it again
you,
sometime.
Paul. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks everyone so much for joining.
All right, everyone. We'll talk to you again soon.